The silver-plated cufflinks gleamed under the midday sun as Victor Langley strode across the marble courtyard of the prestigious Astoria Country Club. His tailored suit fit like armor, polished shoes clicking against the stone in a rhythm that seemed to announce his presence before he spoke a single word. People parted for him automatically, the way water moves aside for a fast-moving ship. Victor liked it that way. Near the fountain at the far end of the courtyard, an old man was kneeling in the soil, his hands covered in dirt as he tended to a bed of fading roses. His back was slightly hunched, the gray in his hair catching the light. His clothes were simple, worn brown trousers, a faded shirt, and a gardener's vest with frayed edges. He moved slowly, carefully, as if each motion was measured against the weight of time. Victor's sharp eyes caught on him, not with curiosity, but with a flicker of annoyance. The executive's path would take him right past this man. And Victor, who had built his career on dismissing distractions, had no patience for the sight of someone who looked so small, so insignificant. As he approached, the old gardener glanced up briefly, offering a polite nod, a gesture of acknowledgement, not servitude. But Victor barely slowed his pace. His lips curled in a faint sneer, and with a flick of his wrist, he brushed past without so much as a good morning. His eyes rolled upward in silent commentary, as if the man's existence was an inconvenience. Several people in the courtyard noticed. A few exchanged glances. Others quickly looked away, unwilling to risk catching Victor's attention. In the polished world of Astoria, status was a language, and Victor spoke it fluently. The expensive suit, the measured stride, the practiced air of superiority. But just as Victor's shadow stretched long across the cobblestones, a quiet, deliberate sound broke the murmur of the crowd. Clink. The old gardener's hand emerged from the deep pocket of his vest, holding something small, metallic, and worn by time. The object caught a shaft of sunlight, sending a flash across the courtyard. Those closest to him stopped talking. Even the soft splash of the fountain seemed distant. It was a medal, but not the kind given for business galas or charity dinners. This one was dull from years of touch, its ribbon slightly frayed. On its surface, the faint engraving of an eagle clutching arrows could be seen, surrounded by words that spoke of valor, sacrifice, and service. The gardener didn't hold it high, nor did he thrust it into anyone's face. He simply rested it in his palm, looking down at it with an expression that was not pride exactly, but remembrance. His thumb traced the familiar grooves as if reacquainting himself with a very old friend. A low murmur began to spread among the onlookers. Someone near the fountain whispered, "That's a Distinguished Service Cross." Another voice, quiet or reverent, replied, "You don't just get one of those. You earn it the hard way." Victor's stride faltered. He turned, irritation flickering in his eyes, ready to demand why everyone was suddenly focused on this gardener instead of continuing their conversations. But then his gaze landed on the medal. Recognition struck with the sharpness of cold water. In his younger days, Victor had read about such honors, usually in the obituaries of men who had done things most people couldn't imagine. The Distinguished Service Cross was second only to the Medal of Honor. It was awarded for extraordinary heroism in combat, often when the odds were impossibly stacked. The old man must have felt the weight of the stairs, but he didn't shrink under them. Instead, he looked up, his eyes locking with Victor's. For a moment, the noise of the courtyard vanished. There was no suit, no dirt, no gulf of status between them, only the unspoken recognition of one life that had been lived in the shadow of danger, and another that had been lived in the safety of boardrooms. The crowd seemed to lean in, as if the air itself had grown dense with anticipation. Then the gardener spoke, his voice calm, steady, carrying a quiet authority that didn't need volume to command attention. "You roll your eyes, son," he said, "but I've seen men roll theirs for the last time." The words hung there, heavy as lead. Victor's expression froze. His mind raced, replaying what he had just heard, trying to reconcile it with the man standing before him. This wasn't some nameless groundskeeper trimming roses for a paycheck. This was someone who had once stood in a place where life and death balanced on the edge of a single decision. Someone nearby whispered, "That's Captain Harris." The Captain Harris. He led the Ghost Ridge rescue back in '78. Another person added, "An entire battalion was pinned down. Everyone said it was impossible, but he got them out. Every single one who was still breathing." Victor felt a coldness crawl into his chest. His own world, one of hostile takeovers and shareholder meetings, suddenly seemed like a child's game compared to the reality in front of him. The gardener, Captain Harris, didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't demand respect. He simply slid the medal back into his vest pocket and returned to tending the roses, his hands moving with the same steady care as before. The crowd remained silent for several seconds more, the kind of silence that feels like a held breath. Then, slowly, conversations resumed, but now they were quieter, tinged with a new awareness. Victor stood there, his jaw tight. The image of that medal burned into his mind. For the first time in years, he felt the uncomfortable weight of humility pressing down on him. Victor didn't move at first. He stood rooted to the spot, his polished shoes feeling suddenly heavy on the courtyard stones. Around him, the manicured perfection of the country club seemed strangely hollow. The pristine fountain, the trimmed hedges, the gleaming golf carts waiting for their owners. All of it felt like a stage set for a far less important play than the one Captain Harris had once performed for real. In that moment, Victor became aware of something else, the way people's eyes no longer followed him. The effortless deference he was used to, the unspoken nods, the quick smiles, had shifted toward the gardener. No, not the gardener. The war hero. He cleared his throat, intending to say something, but words didn't come easily. For a man accustomed to controlling boardrooms, he found himself strangely unsure. Finally, he walked back toward the rose bed, his step slower now, his shadow stretching beside the kneeling figure. "I didn't know," Victor said quietly, the edge stripped from his voice. Harris didn't look up immediately. He pinched a faded petal between his fingers and let it drift to the soil. "Most people don't," he replied simply, "and that's all right. The medals aren't for showing." Victor hesitated, then crouched down, the fabric of his suit brushing against the dirt. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was the closest thing he'd offered in years. "Thank you," he said, and it carried more weight than he expected. Harris's gaze met his again, steady and without judgment. "Take care of your people," he said. "All of them, even the ones you don't notice." Victor nodded slowly, the words lodging somewhere deep. He straightened, dusted off his knee, and for the first time that day, he didn't care about the smudge on his tailored trousers. As he walked away, he noticed the ripple of conversation in the courtyard. Not gossip, not mockery, but something quieter. Respect, reflection. Some of the younger members glanced toward Harris with the kind of curiosity that hinted they might approach him later, to ask questions or simply to listen. Victor knew the image would stay with him. The weathered medal catching the sun, the calm voice that could still a crowd, the reminder that the worth of a man wasn't stitched into his suit or etched on a business card. At the far end of the courtyard, he paused and looked back. Harris was still there, trimming the roses with the same patience as before. Yet somehow, the air around him felt different, as if everyone now saw the quiet figure for who he truly was. Victor inhaled deeply, the faint scent of roses mixing with something rarer, humility. He adjusted his cufflinks, not out of habit, but to keep his hands from trembling. Then he left the courtyard with a new awareness in his step, carrying a silent vow that he would not forget the lesson planted in him that day. Some medals shine in glass cases. Others live quietly in pockets of men who no longer need to prove anything, men who have already given more than most could imagine. And sometimes, it takes only a moment for the rest of the world to remember that.